The amber liquid in Sarah Martinez's glass caught the dim bar light as she stared at her reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. 3 hours had passed since she'd stood at attention beside Lieutenant Commander Jake Reaper Morrison's flag-draped coffin, listening to the 21-gun salute echo across Arlington National Cemetery. Her dress blue uniform felt heavier than her combat gear ever had, weighted down by memories and medals that told only half her story. The Anchor's Rest was the kind of dive bar where military personnel went to drink away their ghosts. Sarah had chosen it specifically because nobody asked questions here. Nobody thanked her for her service, and nobody stared at the ribbons on her chest trying to decode her history. She just wanted to sit in silence and remember Jake's laugh, the way he'd always called her Ghost, even when they weren't on mission. Another whiskey? Tommy, the grizzled bartender, slid the bottle toward her. His forearms bore faded marine tattoos, and he had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much. "I'm good," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She touched the Purple Heart on her chest, earned in a firefight that officially never happened. In a country she'd never been deployed to, the bar's atmosphere shifted when Marcus Webb stumbled through the door. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. Threat assessment was as automatic as breathing. 6'2", approximately 200 pounds, bloodshot eyes scanning for easy targets. His movements were erratic, aggressive. Drunk, but not just drunk. Something harder was coursing through his system. Marcus lurched toward the bar, shoving past an elderly veteran in a Vietnam cap. "Hey, Grandpa, move it!" The old man nearly fell, catching himself against a bar stool. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she remained seated. "Not my fight," she told herself. "Stay invisible." That had been her mantra for 3 years, ever since the Pentagon had erased her from existence. "Gimme a beer," Marcus slurred, slapping a crumpled 20 on the bar. "And make it fast." Tommy set down a bottle with practiced indifference. "That'll be $6. "6? For this piss water?" Marcus's voice rose dangerously. "You're ripping me off, old man." "Price is the price," Tommy replied calmly, but Sarah noticed his hand drift toward the baseball bat he kept behind the register. Marcus's face flushed red. "You know what? I don't think I'm paying at all." His hand moved to his jacket, and Sarah caught the glint of metal. A knife 4-inch blade, serrated edge. Her body tensed like a coiled spring. "Listen, son," Tommy said, his voice steady despite the weapon now visible. "Let's not do anything stupid here." "Stupid?" Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that made the other patrons shift nervously. "You want to see stupid?" He vaulted over the bar with surprising agility, landing behind the register where Tommy stood frozen, the knife pressed against Tommy's throat as Marcus grabbed him by the collar. "Empty the register. Now. Every last dollar." Sarah was already moving before her conscious mind made the decision. 3 years of forced inactivity hadn't dulled her reflexes. If anything, the suppressed energy made her faster. She covered the distance to the bar in 2 silent strides, her dress shoes making no sound on the worn wooden floor. Marcus never saw her coming. Sarah's left hand clamped down on his wrist, applying pressure to the nerve cluster that would make his fingers go numb. Her right elbow drove into his solar plexus with surgical precision, hard enough to drop him, not hard enough to kill. The knife clattered to the floor as Marcus doubled over, gasping. But Marcus was stronger than he looked, and desperation made him dangerous. He swung wildly with his free hand, catching Sarah across the cheek. The blow would have staggered a civilian, but Sarah had taken hits from Taliban fighters hopped up on combat drugs. She barely flinched. "Big mistake," she said quietly. Sarah pivoted, using Marcus's own momentum against him. Her hip became a fulcrum as she executed a perfect judo throw, sending all 200 pounds of him crashing through the nearest table. Wood splintered, and beer bottles exploded against the wall in a shower of glass and foam. Marcus tried to get up, blood streaming from his nose where it had connected with the table edge. Sarah was already there, one knee pressed against his spine. His arm twisted at an angle that promised excruciating pain if he moved. "Stay down," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The bar had gone dead silent, except for Marcus's labored breathing and the distant wail of sirens someone had called. 911. Sarah's heart sank. The last thing she needed was police attention, questions about her identity, background checks that might uncover things that were supposed to stay buried. "You broke my nose," Marcus wheezed, trying to turn his head. "You crazy bitch, you broke my nose." "Be grateful that's all I broke," Sarah replied, maintaining pressure on his arm. She could feel the familiar calm that came over her in combat situations, time slowing down. Every detail crystal clear. The sirens grew louder, and red and blue lights began flashing through the bar's grimy windows. Sarah released Marcus and stepped back, straightening her uniform jacket. Her ribbons caught the light Purple Heart bronze star with V device for valor, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat 5, Combat Action Ribbon. Each one represented classified operations that officially never happened. Two police officers burst through the door, hands on their weapons. Officer Kane, a 20-year veteran with graying temples, and Officer Rodriguez, younger and eager. Their eyes swept the scene: broken furniture, blood on the floor, a woman in military dress uniform standing calmly beside a groaning man. "What happened here?" Kane demanded. Marcus struggled to his feet, pointing an accusatory finger at Sarah. "She attacked me. Look at her. She's not even a real soldier. Women can't be SEALs." His voice cracked with pain and rage. "She's stolen valor. Fake military. Arrest her." Kane's eyes narrowed as he studied Sarah's uniform. The SEAL Trident pin gleamed on her chest, positioned perfectly above her ribbons. His expression grew skeptical in 20 years of police work. He'd seen plenty of military imposters, and something about this didn't add up. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification," Kane said, his hand still resting on his weapon. Sarah reached slowly for her wallet. Producing her military ID, Kane examined it carefully, comparing the photo to her face. Everything looked legitimate, but doubt gnawed at him. Female SEALs were rare, almost mythical. And this woman looked too young, too small to have earned the decoration she wore. "According to this, you're a communications specialist," Rodriguez observed, reading over Kane's shoulder. "But you're wearing a SEAL Trident. That's a federal offense if you're not authorized." "I'm authorized," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the growing crowd of onlookers gathering outside the bar's windows. Marcus wiped blood from his nose, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "She's lying. I know stolen valor when I see it. My brother is a real Marine. He told me about fakes like her." Kane studied Sarah's face, looking for tells, signs of deception. Her expression remained neutral, but he caught something in her eyes, a hardness that spoke of violence witnessed and violence done. Still, regulations were regulations. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us for questioning. We'll sort this out at the station." Sarah's hands remained at her sides as Kane approached with handcuffs. "Officer, you're making a mistake." "Maybe so," Kane replied, "but that's for the detectives to figure out. You have the right to remain silent." The cold metal clicked around Sarah's wrists as her Miranda rights echoed through the suddenly quiet bar. Outside, camera phones were already recording, and Sarah knew that within hours, her face would be plastered across social media with hashtags like #StolenValor and #FakeSeal. As they led her toward the patrol car, Sarah caught her reflection in the bar's window, a ghost in dress blues. Finally visible again, but for all the wrong reasons. The fluorescent lights in interview room 3 hummed with the persistence of angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across the scarred metal table. Sarah Martinez sat with military precision, her spine straight, hands folded, eyes fixed on a point 6 inches above Detective Lisa Rodriguez's head. The technique was called the 1,000-yard stare, a psychological defense mechanism she'd perfected during 3 years of deep cover operations, where showing weakness meant death. Rodriguez slammed a thick manila folder onto the table, the sound echoing off the concrete walls like a gunshot. Inside were printouts, photographs, and what appeared to be military records. Sarah didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She'd been interrogated by Taliban commanders who made this detective look like a kindergarten teacher. Sarah Elena Martinez, 26 years old, born in El Paso, Texas. Rodriguez began, reading from the file. Enlisted in the Navy at 18, completed basic training at Great Lakes, then communications school at Pensacola. According to your official record, you served as a radio man 2nd class aboard the USS Constellation, then transferred to shore duty at Naval Station Norfolk. She looked up, her dark eyes searching Sarah's face for any reaction. Nowhere in here does it mention SEAL training, Bud, S graduation, or authorization to wear that trident pin. Sarah remained silent, her breathing steady and controlled. In her peripheral vision, she could see the two-way mirror where she knew other officers were watching, probably placing bets on how long it would take to break her. Rodriguez leaned forward, her voice taking on a more aggressive tone. We called Naval Special Warfare Command at Coronado. Spoke directly to the personnel office. No record of any Sarah Martinez completing Bud S training. No female by that name on any SEAL team rosters. She paused for effect. Want to explain that? The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Sarah had learned long ago that silence was a weapon. It made people uncomfortable, forced them to fill the void with words that often revealed more than they intended. Rodriguez was no different. Look, I get it, the detective continued, her tone shifting to false sympathy. Military service is respected, admired. Maybe you wanted people to see you as a hero, wanted the recognition that comes with being elite. But this isn't the way. Rodriguez's phone buzzed against the metal table, the vibration unnaturally loud in the small room. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed. Shit, she muttered, then caught herself. Sorry, professional language. Sarah's eyes flicked to the phone screen, reading the text message upside down, a skill that had saved her life more than once. It was from Rodriguez's partner, Media Circus Outside. Stories gone viral. Hashtag FakeCL trending on Twitter. Channel 7 wants statement. Rodriguez turned the phone face down, but the damage was done. Sarah felt a familiar cold settle in her stomach. The same feeling she'd had when her cover was blown in Kandahar, and she'd had to fight her way out of a Taliban compound with nothing but a knife and her training. Seems like you're famous, Rodriguez said, unable to keep the satisfaction out of her voice. She pulled up Twitter on her phone, scrolling through the feed. Let's see what people are saying about you. The detective began reading comments aloud, each one designed to break down Sarah's psychological defenses. Another stolen valor fake. Disgusting. Real. SEALs died for that pin she's wearing. Lock her up and throw away the key. Attention-seeking wannabe. Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign that the words were having any effect. She thought of Jake Morrison, of the real SEALs who had died believing she was just a communication specialist, never knowing she'd been fighting beside them in operations, so classified they didn't officially exist. Rodriguez set the phone down and opened another folder. Here's what I think happened. You served honorably as a radio operator. Nothing wrong with that. But it wasn't enough, was it? You wanted more recognition, more respect. So you bought some ribbons online, got yourself a seal pin, and started playing dress-up. The detective stood and began pacing around the small room. A classic interrogation technique designed to make the subject feel surrounded, trapped. The Purple Heart, the Bronze Star with V device, all of it fake. You probably researched what ribbons would look impressive, made sure they told a good story. Sarah's hands remained perfectly still, but inside, rage was building like pressure in a boiler. Those ribbons represented real blood, real sacrifice. The Purple Heart came from shrapnel that had torn through her shoulder during a raid on a Taliban weapons cache. The Bronze Star was earned when she'd held off 20 insurgents single-handedly while her team evacuated wounded civilians. The thing is, Rodriguez continued, stolen valor isn't just about lying. It's about spitting in the face of every man and woman who actually earned those decorations. It's about the door opened, interrupting the detective's monologue. Sergeant Mike Chun stuck his head in, his expression troubled. Rodriguez, we've got a problem. The story's everywhere, CNN, Fox News, social media. The Navy's getting calls and... He hesitated. There's something weird about her records. Rodriguez stepped outside, leaving Sarah alone in the room. Through the thin walls, she could hear muffled conversation, the words classified and above my pay grade drifting through. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Someone was starting to ask the right questions. When Rodriguez returned, her confidence had been replaced by uncertainty. She sat down heavily, studying Sarah with new eyes. The Navy's being evasive about your service record. They're saying some information is classified. Need to know basis only. Sarah spoke for the first time in over an hour. Her voice calm and steady. I want to make one phone call. You already had your phone call, Rodriguez replied automatically. No, I didn't. I was offered one and declined. I'm requesting it now. Sarah's eyes met the detective's directly for the first time. I want to call JSOC. Rodriguez blinked in confusion. JSOC? Joint Special Operations Command? Why would you? Because, Sarah said quietly, there are things about my service that you don't have clearance to know. Things that require someone with the proper authority to explain. The detective's phone rang, the shrill sound making her jump. She answered with a sharp Rodriguez, then listened for several minutes, her face growing pale. Yes, sir. I understand. Right away. She hung up and stared at Sarah with a mixture of confusion and growing concern. That was my captain. Apparently, someone very high up the food chain is asking questions about you. Someone with enough stars on their collar to make the chief of police nervous. Sarah remained silent, but something had changed in her posture, a subtle shift that suggested coiled energy. Like a predator preparing to strike, Rodriguez gathered her files, her movements suddenly uncertain. I'm going to step out for a few minutes. Get you some water, maybe something to eat. This might take a while to sort out. As the detective left the room, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax slightly. She knew what was coming next. Somewhere in the Pentagon, secure phones were ringing, and people with the highest security clearances were asking very pointed questions about why a ghost operative was sitting in a civilian jail cell. The fluorescent lights continued their incessant humming, but Sarah no longer heard them. She was thinking about Admiral James Harrison, the only man alive who knew the full truth about Operation Neptune's daughter. If anyone could pull her out of this mess, it would be him. She just hoped he would arrive before the media circus outside turned into something that could never be contained. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight, and Sarah Martinez, Ghost 7, waited for her past to catch up with her present. The automatic doors of the Riverside Police Department burst open with the force of a controlled explosion, and Admiral James Harrison strode through like a man accustomed to parting seas. His dress-white uniform was immaculate despite the late hour, every ribbon and medal positioned with mathematical precision. The gold braid on his sleeves caught the harsh fluorescent lighting, and the 4 stars on his collar seemed to gleam with their own authority. Desk. Sergeant Paula Williams looked up from her paperwork and felt her breath catch. In 23 years of police work, she'd seen plenty of military brass, but this man radiated power like a nuclear reactor. His steel-gray eyes swept the room with the calculating gaze of someone who'd spent decades making life-and-death decisions in situations most people couldn't imagine. Where is she? Harrison's voice carried the weight of absolute command, the kind of tone that had once ordered submarine strikes and special operations raids from the Pentagon's most classified briefing rooms. Williams stammered, suddenly feeling like a recruit facing her drill instructor. "Sir, Who are you looking for exactly?" Harrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The woman you arrested tonight. Sarah Martinez. I want to see her immediately." "Admiral," Williams said, reading his rank insignia with growing nervousness. "I'm going to need to check with Sergeant." Harrison's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. "I flew here from Norfolk in a military transport that cost the taxpayers $50,000 in fuel. I have authorization from the Secretary of the Navy and a direct order from the Joint Chiefs. Do not make me repeat myself." Williams' hand trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. "Detective Rodriguez?" "There's an Admiral here." "Yes, sir. 4 stars. He wants to see the Martinez woman immediately." She listened for a moment, then hung up. "Should be right out, sir." Harrison nodded curtly and began pacing the small waiting area like a caged predator. Other officers in the station found excuses to walk past, stealing glances at the highest-ranking military officer most of them had ever seen in person. His presence seemed to charge the air with electricity, making everyone speak in hushed tones. Detective Rodriguez appeared 5 minutes later. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. She'd spent the time frantically Googling Admiral Harrison, and what she'd found had made her blood run cold. This wasn't just any flag officer, this was the man who'd overseen some of the most classified operations in recent military history. His name appeared in redacted documents about missions that officially never happened. "Admiral Harrison," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Detective Rodriguez. I've been handling the Martinez case." Harrison's handshake was brief and perfunctory. "Detective, I need to see her now." "Sir, with all due respect, she's being held on federal charges. Impersonating military personnel. Stolen valor. Detective Rodriguez." Harrison's voice cut through her explanation like a blade. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Take me to her, now." Rodriguez led him through the maze of corridors toward the holding cells, her mind racing. "Admiral, can you tell me what your interest is in this case? Because according to our records, Martinez was just a communications specialist." Harrison stopped walking so abruptly that Rodriguez nearly collided with him. "What records?" "Her service jacket. We pulled it from the Navy personnel database. Standard communications rating. Nothing special about. Show me." Rodriguez pulled out her phone and displayed the digital file they'd accessed. Harrison studied it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "This is a cover file," he said finally. "A legend. Completely fabricated." "I don't understand." "You're not supposed to understand." Harrison resumed walking. "That's the point." They reached the holding area, where Sarah sat in cell 3, still maintaining perfect military posture, despite having been imprisoned for over 6 hours. The moment Harrison saw her through the bars, his entire demeanor changed. The commanding officer facade cracked, revealing something that looked almost like fear. He stepped closer to the cell, his eyes scanning her face with the intensity of a man trying to solve a puzzle. Sarah looked up, and their eyes met. Two people sharing a secret that could topple governments. "Turn around," Harrison said quietly. Sarah stood and turned, lifting her hair slightly. There, behind her left ear, was a small tattoo that Rodriguez had to squint to see clearly. It was an anchor, no bigger than a dime, with intricate details that spoke of professional work. But it wasn't the artistry that made Harrison's hands shake. It was what the tattoo represented. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "That tattoo's real." Rodriguez leaned closer, confused. "Sir, what does that mean?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly racing through calculations and consequences. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of classified secrets. "That mark, it identifies membership in a unit that doesn't officially exist. Operation Neptune's Daughter." The name hung in the air like a live grenade. Rodriguez felt the hair on her arms stand up, though she didn't understand why. Sarah finally spoke, her voice steady but carrying undertones of emotion she'd kept buried for years. "Kandahar province, sir. The compound that wasn't supposed to be there. 18 months deep cover, 2019 to 2023. Harrison's face went pale. "Jesus Christ. You're Ghost 7. The words hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. She'd heard whispers about ghost operatives, rumors in military circles about operators so classified that they were erased from all official records. Urban legends about soldiers who became living ghosts, carrying out missions that were too sensitive for even the most elite units. "Admiral," Rodriguez said, her voice barely steady, "I need to understand what's happening here." Harrison looked around the holding area, noting the security cameras, the other prisoners who might be listening. "Clear this area. Everyone out now." "Sir, I can't just—" "Detective." Harrison's voice carried the authority of someone who'd given orders that had changed the course of history. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. If you repeat it to anyone without proper authorization, you'll spend the rest of your life in federal prison. Do you understand?" Rodriguez nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. She called for the area to be cleared, and within minutes, they were alone except for Sarah in her cell. Harrison moved closer to the bars, his voice dropping to a whisper. Operation Neptune's Daughter was a black program. Darker than black. It took the most elite female operators from across all branches and created something. New deep cover assets who could go places and do things that traditional special operations couldn't touch. Sarah's composure finally began to crack, tears forming in her eyes as years of enforced silence started to crumble. "They made us disappear, sir. Completely. New identities, fabricated service records. Even our families were told we died in training accidents." "How many?" Harrison asked. 12 of us initially. By the end, Sarah's voice caught. "I'm the only one left." Rodriguez felt the world tilting around her. "You mean she's killed more high-value targets than most entire SEAL teams," Harrison said quietly. "Dismantled terrorist networks from the inside. Prevented attacks that would have killed thousands of Americans. And officially, none of it ever happened." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, the gesture somehow making her look both vulnerable and dangerous. "I've been living as a ghost for 3 years, sir. My own teammates think I'm dead. I can't even visit my mother's grave because Sarah Martinez is supposed to be buried in it." Harrison turned to Rodriguez, his expression grim. "Detective, you've stumbled into something that goes to the highest levels of national security. This woman is a hero, but she's also a liability that certain people would prefer stay buried." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Harrison said, pulling out his secure phone, "that there are people in Washington who are going to be very unhappy that Ghost 7 is alive and talking. Admiral Harrison's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message that made his jaw clench. He glanced at the screen, then at Detective Rodriguez, weighing his next words carefully. "Detective, I need you to clear this entire wing. No exceptions. What happens next is above your security clearance." Rodriguez hesitated, her instincts warring with protocol. "Admiral, with respect, this is still my jurisdiction. Not anymore." Harrison's voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. "As of 30 seconds ago, this case has been transferred to military authority under the National Defense Authorization Act. You can cooperate, or you can be removed. Your choice." The detective looked between Harrison and Sarah, seeing something in their shared glances that spoke of secrets, darker than anything she'd encountered in 20 years of police work. She nodded reluctantly and began clearing the area, her footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. Once they were alone, Harrison approached Sarah's cell with the key Rodriguez had reluctantly provided. "Go 7, we have a problem. The Pentagon's in full damage control mode. They want you transferred to a black site within the hour." Sarah stood as the cell door swung open, her movements fluid despite hours of confinement. "Let me guess, permanent transfer? The kind you don't come back from." Harrison's expression was grim. "There are people who invested too much in making you disappear to let you surface now. The Deputy Secretary of Defense is already spinning this as a national security breach." Sarah stepped out of the cell, straightening her uniform with practiced precision. "What about the media coverage? This has gone too far to contain quietly." Harrison pulled up his phone, showing her the trending hashtags. Hashtag fake seal had been joined by hashtag military cover-up and hashtag ghost operative. Conspiracy theories were spreading like wildfire, some surprisingly close to the truth. The story's mutating faster than they can control it. Someone leaked classified fragments, not enough to compromise ongoing operations, but enough to make people ask dangerous questions. Who leaked it? Unknown. But whoever it was has high-level access and knows exactly what buttons to push. Harrison paused, studying Sarah's face. "There's something else. Jake Morrison's funeral. You were photographed there. Military intelligence ran facial recognition and found matches in classified surveillance footage from operations that officially never happened." Sarah felt the walls closing in. Jake had been her handler, the only person who knew her real identity during the Neptune's daughter operations. His death in a training accident 3 months ago had been suspicious, but she'd been powerless to investigate. They killed him, didn't they? I can't prove it, but Jake was asking questions about the program's termination. He thought some of the other ghost operatives might still be alive. Harrison's voice dropped. He was planning to go public. The pieces clicked into place in Sarah's mind with terrifying clarity. The bar tonight, that wasn't random. Marcus Webb was sent to create a situation that would get me arrested, put me in the system where they could disappear me quietly. That's my assessment. Harrison checked his watch. "We have maybe 20 minutes before a federal transport team arrives to take you into custody. After that, Sarah Martinez ceases to exist permanently." Sarah's training kicked in, her mind shifting into operational mode. "What are my options?" "Officially? None. You're a ghost who was never supposed to surface. The easiest solution is to make you disappear again." Harrison met her eyes. "Unofficially? I have a plan, but it's going to require you to trust me completely." Before Sarah could respond, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Police Chief Morgan appeared, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who radiated federal authority. The lead agent, a thin man with predatory eyes, flashed credentials. "Agent Collins, FBI. We're here for the Martinez woman." Harrison stepped between them and Sarah, his 4 stars suddenly seeming to weigh more than gold. "Agent Collins, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Ms. Martinez is under military jurisdiction. Collins smiled coldly. Not according to the warrant I'm carrying. Federal charges of impersonating military personnel supersede any military claims. Show me the warrant. Collins produced a document that Harrison examined carefully. His expression darkened as he read. This is signed by Judge Blackwood. He's been retired for 6 months. Administrative error. The warrant is still valid. No, Harrison said quietly. It's not. He pulled out his own phone and speed-dialed a number. This is Admiral Harrison. I need an immediate conference call with the Secretary of Defense and the Attorney General. Yes, I'll hold. Collins' confidence wavered slightly. Admiral, you're interfering with a federal investigation. Agent Collins. Sarah's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Before you take me anywhere, you might want to know that I've been recording this entire conversation. She held up a small device that had been concealed in her uniform. Everything from the moment you walked in, including your use of a fraudulent warrant. Collins lunged for the device, but Sarah was faster. Years of combat training made her movements fluid and precise. She sidestepped his grab and placed herself in a defensive position that would allow her to disable both agents if necessary. I wouldn't, she said calmly. The recording is already uploaded to a secure server. If I don't check in every 12 hours, it gets automatically released to every major news outlet in the country. Harrison's phone call connected, and his voice carried the authority of someone speaking directly to the highest levels of government. Mr. Secretary, we have a situation. Yes, sir. Ghost 7 is alive. No, sir. That's not possible anymore. The story's already public. Collins and his partner exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't going according to their script. Harrison continued his conversation, his voice growing stronger. Sir, I recommend we get ahead of this. Full disclosure, congressional oversight, the works. Yes, I understand the implications, but the alternative is worse. He hung up and turned to Collins with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Agent Collins, you and your partner are relieved. This case is now under direct Pentagon oversight. You can't just, I can and I am. Harrison's voice carried the weight of 30 years commanding America's most elite warriors. The Secretary of Defense has just authorized Operation Daylight full declassification of the Neptune's daughter. PROGRM. Mums Martinez is now under protective custody pending congressional testimony. Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she'd carried for 3 years. You're bringing us back from the dead? All of you. Every ghost operative who's still alive. Harrison's expression was grim but determined. It's time to tell the truth about what you sacrificed for this country. Collins made one last desperate play. Admiral, you have no idea what you're unleashing. There are operations still running. Assets in the field. Assets that have been compromised by the very people who are trying to silence Ghost 7. Harrison stepped closer to Collins, his voice dropping to a whisper. Agent Collins, I know exactly who you work for, and it's not the FBI. Tell your real employers that the game is over. As Collins and his partner retreated, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like herself again, not a ghost. Not a legend, but a warrior who had served her country with honor. What happens now? She asked. Harrison straightened his uniform, preparing for the battle ahead. Now we go to war with the people who tried to erase you. And this time, we're fighting in the light. Outside, the media circus continued, but the story was about to change completely. Ghost 7 was coming back from the dead, and she was bringing the truth with her.